Well, ladies and gentlemen, people of YouTube, welcome back to the dojo. I'm Ryu, that's Age, and today, for something slightly different, as we wait for some of our other animated shows to come out for the summer season, like Tanya and Skeleton Knight, stuff like that, we had some slots available. We wanted to talk about some of the stuff that we've been watching on our own time, stuff like that. One of them was the One Piece live action. It was quite good. We'll probably do something about that next week. But right now, we're here to talk about Season 2 of The Last Airbender Live Action. And, well, any real fan of the series knows that Season 1 was a dumpster fire. Just across the board. And let's start off by saying this. I need people to stop blaming the actors. There is so much misplaced hate in the world today, and stuff that we talked about in our intro video and how and why we do things. Check that out if you're new to the channel. It explains a lot. We kind of TLDR it in the first 5 minutes of that. So if you don't want to watch the entire thing, TLDR it pretty good in that. The link is in the description for that. But there's one of the problems that I have with a lot of this is a lot of people are blaming the actors for this series being not as good as it should be, right? Because let's face it, all they had to do here was just color in the lines of the animated series and do a shot-for-shot remake, and it would have been fine. The cinematography, the locales, some of the CG, we're going to get to that, is all completely fine for a live-action remake. You know what I mean? Well, let's start there. I don't want to start by, ragging on it, because man, are we going to. Don't get me wrong. We don't like to shit on stuff here. That's not what we like to do. But when something deserves criticism, we're going to do it. And this is probably going to be the thing that we shit on the most out of the entire history of our channel. But we're not going to start with that. We're going to start with some of the stuff that was actually good. But before we get started, like I said, I just want to point out all the hate that is going to some of these actors for just doing their job. They're not the ones in charge of casting, writing, any of that. They're just there to be actors. Are there some actors that are like producers and directors and stuff like that? Absolutely. None of these actors are, okay? I'm fairly certain that none of these actors have anything to do with the production, the development, the writing, any of that stuff. So, especially the ones that are getting hate, like Mai's actor. Yeah, it was probably a miscast, and they could have got somebody who looked a little bit more like Mai. Who cares? She's there to do her job. Stop hating on her for doing her job. Her being what she is not a problem with the live action. It's the writing and the direction. That's the major problem. All they had to do was do a shot-for-shot remake. Not unlike what One Piece is doing. It might not be shot-for-shot, but Oda, the creator of the damn series, is lording over them, and I can guarantee you that if he didn't want them to do something and didn't like a direction that they were doing for One Piece's live action, he would have said so, and he would have never signed off on it. He was always there on the filming and the set and all that stuff. You can see all that stuff in the behind the scenes stuff. In this was just like Nickelodeon selling off The Last Airbender to Netflix as like a spite move, like this is what we're gonna do. And then for whatever reason, the people in charge of this, the writers and stuff like that, we talked about, if you guys saw our Jujutsu Kaisen Maki episode where, people just like the aura farming 3 minutes, like the TikTok video, and they can't get over, they can't do anything beyond the 3 minutes of dopamine hit. These writers and directors, that's what it feels like they're doing. Either they're spite changing the series, or they're the kind of people that only knew the greatest highlights of the Last Airbender series. You know what I mean? Because a lot of the big time, what you would call aura farming moments or just big time moments and quotes of the series are in the series verbatim, down to the letter. And they say it and they act it out exactly like it happened in the scene in the animated show. So they're aware of some of the big stuff. You know what I mean? Example, when Katara points out how the Fire Nation took her mother away from her, and Zuko mentions that, oh, that's something that we have in common. That entire sequence there was verbatim what they did in the animated show. So they know what's supposed to be happening. You know what I mean? So when it comes to that, it's like it's either they're spite doing it and leaving in some of the stuff to give people some freaking hope that, whatever you want to call it, or they just have like the cliff notes of the series and are just kind of like sort of also making it their own, you know, in certain ways that we'll get to, which in certain ways, based on their writing, was totally reasonably fine based on their own retconned writing. You know what I mean? Some of the stuff that made sense. Example, making Sai, the mechanist, a bigger character and him having his love interest and stuff like that. Totally fine to add to the series. You know, as like an addition, make Sai a little bit bigger of a thing, have him be like more of Sokka's mentor. Totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You know what I mean? Stuff like that, completely fine. Whatever. If you want to put that in the live action, so be it. You have plenty of runtime. The amount of runtime for this so far has been more than enough to cover a shot-for-shot remake of the original, because once again, all of these episodes are double and a little over double length, so every season of The Last Airbender was 20 episodes minus, you know, book 3, which was like 22 or something like that. So, but each one of those episodes was about 20 minutes, right? So at that point, you need about 20 double-length or 10 double-length episodes to cover that. Now, if you go closer to an hour, you need less than that. So at about 6.5 hours of runtime for this season 2, that's more than enough to cover all 20 of the episodes. You know what I mean? In a shot-for-shot kind of situation. So that was... It was after the debacle and like just completely repressing season 1. Age and I looked at it and said, okay, we're going to watch this because we have to watch the bad with the good, just so that we can point out stuff like this and say, this is something that's bad, this is something that's good, like comparing and contrasting, say, a good live action with One Piece versus a bad live action with Last Airbender here. And at the end of the day, you can look at stuff like IMDb all you want, you know, with a 7.1 rating. That is being generous as far as I'm concerned. Because the stuff that is in it, the problem isn't necessarily the changes that they made to the story. It's that they don't understand their own continuity that they have created, because there are so many different writers and directors going on in the kitchen at the same time. Let's start with this. Episode 1. The director, I'm not going to name names, you guys can look them up, but episodes 1 and 2 have the same director. The writers in every episode after episode 1 are all different, except for episode 7, that is co-written by the writer of episode 1 and episode 5. Now, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of shows, you know, that are out there that have, you know, actors or whoever it is that have multiple writers and multiple different directors and stuff like that for different episodes based on what's going on. And sometimes there's a rogue chicken that just kind of shows up and, you know, crashes the party. And that's totally fine. But in those situations, they know their own continuity. They know what they're doing with the characters. They know what they're doing with the story across the board between all of them. And in the case of this show, it feels like they didn't have that. It felt like they just wrote an episode and then they just put it together in sequence. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, example, for whatever reason, they had, you know how like the Last Airbender verse had the mashups between like two animals, like platypus bear and, you know, possum chicken and, you know, stuff like that. That was like one of the big things with the Avatar verse, and that's why the Earth King's bear singular was weird to everybody in this season. You know what I mean? So instead of that, in this they had mixed fruit for one episode, and then later on, not mixed fruit. So it's just random. Is that a big deal? Not really, but it's still continuity errors like that were just kind of like rampant throughout it. You know what I mean?
Once again, the biggest continuity errors between season 1 and season 2, and that was that season 1 states that the comment is coming this year, and then this season apparently takes place several years. They don't say exactly how many, just they say several years since the end of season 1. So the comment should have already came and gone by their own continuity.
Yeah. So, you know, once again, it was just. It became a game for me to just kind of like see what madness and stupid nonsense that they were going to come up with when they have the roadmap. You know what I mean? They had one of the best animated series that has ever existed as a roadmap, and they just chose to do the things they did. You see a lot of that kind of stuff with several other live actions and certain things, like the guy who took over Devil May Cry, just writing his own stuff, which totally fine if you want to write your own stuff, but claiming that this is the original, it's not. You're doing your own thing and you're butchering it. So if you want to say that this is an alternate universe and a different kind of timeline, I would respect that way more than them saying that this is like a live action adaptation of The Last Airbender or whatever that guy is doing with Devil May Cry. You know what I mean? It's like, this is, like the Prime universe, but no, this is like a secondary universe where things are slightly different. I'd respect that way more than butchering what is already established as something that's very good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, which I did already clarify that this series is a Spike series. It was literally just Nickelodeon gave the Avatar creators rights to the IP after they fought with them over it for years after the end of Korra.
Yeah.
Because they very much were opposed to the mistreatment of Korra. Korra was only supposed to be one season.
Yeah.
But then Nickelodeon just kept making them write new seasons.
Right.
But as part of their deal of getting the IP away from Nickelodeon was like, we already signed off on this thing with Netflix. You have to let them do it. That's why, like, if you look in the credits and stuff like that, it's the credits associated with Nickelodeon, not with the original creators.
Yeah.
Because this is a Nickelodeon. This was just the last remaining Nickelodeon deal from before the creators got the IP back.
Right. So it's just one of those things that, like, as the people that are handed this series to do it, it shouldn't matter that Nickelodeon handed this to them in spite. They should have just had the integrity to do it correctly. You know what I mean? It's right there. If you're looking into the series at all, you have to know how beloved it is. And doing what they did to it is just a tragedy, honestly, just across the board. Because it could have been fine. You know what I mean? Like, example, they casted the guy who plays Aang is, like, off screen. He's like Aang. They casted, like, the happy-go-lucky kid to be Aang. Casting. Great. They're not letting him be Aang. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for whatever reason, we get this weird, like, moody, can't figure out what he's feeling at any given time. Freaking Aang, who never really is happy and quirky.
Yep. So, casting was spot on, but then the writing kind of butchered it. But either way, like I said, we wanted to talk about some of the good things before we dive into just some of the stuff that is just objectively bad across the board and just shows the lack of any knowledge with the actual universe.
I will say, on the casting note, in the good department, once again, Sokka is still, like, probably the standout of the season. Just like in season 1.
Right.
And Toph's freaking actress, despite, once again, being too tall for the role, that's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Otherwise, she looks like Toph, sounds like Toph. The only real problem is the writing for certain parts.
Right. So, once again, like I said, some of the good stuff. The first good thing that we could say about this. Did you guys see the freaking CG on the serpent from Serpent's Pass? That was like Smaug-esque. That was like, did they blow their whole budget on the serpent? Because Appa and Momo look mediocre at best, but that serpent was styling. Okay.
Momo generally looks fine, but Momo's almost never even on screen. Appa looks terrible.
Yeah. So, if the bar is here, the serpent is a little above the bar, and Appa and Momo are definitely below the bar. So, like, when we saw that, we were like, what's happening? Was that their whole budget? So the serpent fight, all that stuff was pretty good. The serpent especially, the action sequence, maybe not so much, but the serpent itself was very impressive across the board. So that's something nice to say about it. They nailed that design and stuff like that. So that was cool. That was very, very neat to see. Despite the fact that everything was out of order, and we'll get to that. Once again, Age mentioned it. Toph's actress, I think she did a good job for what she was handed. I think if she was handed the original verbatim role, she would have nailed it too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if this was actually a shot for shot, then she would have been like probably friggin' held up there as like being a very good Toph.
Yeah. So that is what it is. You just have to look at it for what it is. Some of the story elements that they chose to go with that were like okay, that you could live with based on how they are portraying the story. Like Iroh and Zuko becoming farmers for the turn of the seasons. You know what I mean? Because that was another thing that proved that they had a bunch of time had passed, years, because Zuko mentions we're back to melons again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it'd been several. They spent at least a year or so, because he mentions it's been like at least 3 or 4 seasons that they've done a full crop rotation while being on the farm.
Yeah, so that part of the story, like if you want them to be farmers for a little bit or whatever, that's fine. But the fact that that already proves that kills the continuity of how the comet's supposed to exist, that's already one of the major problems. But if you wanted to have them doing something like that slightly different than their like weary travelers on the road stuff that they did during that, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. They did that like Earth Kingdom town stuff with the Zuko alone stuff, kind of that slightly differently. They kind of rolled a couple of the characters into one.
Yeah.
But you know, that was okay, stuff like that. But the
biggest thing with that was, yeah, it's just a thing of they had to extend it because they threw in this weird time skip of making it several years instead of like 3 weeks to a month that was normally the in-between of season 1 and season 2.
Yeah.
And then the biggest thing, honestly, about the Zuko alone stuff that was just weird that they changed was, once again, the whole him stealing from the pregnant woman.
Yeah.
And then her coming back in the freaking Ba Sing Se story stuff.
Yeah. And the last thing that is just kind of okay that I can live with is, to a certain extent, because once again, if it's part of the universe that they're writing, it's fine. But once again, Toph is blind. She doesn't know how to read. But they allowed her to do her thing with, writing Aang a message in, kanji, which this is supposed to be Chinese culture. They did it in Japanese kanji.
Yeah.
Okay. They did Chinese lettering later, but I checked it in that scene where where they're having the dinner at the Beifong estate. Her message to Aang is in Japanese kanji. So this is supposed to be Chinese. 2 different cultures. It's very offensive to both sides.
Yeah,
so
all 4 nations are supposed to be based off of different Asian cultures. You have the air nomads are Tibetan, the fire nation is Japan, the earth nation is China, and the water tribes are like Siberian Inuit.
Yeah. So either way, that was another oof. But if Braille is a thing in this universe and it's a thing, fine, I can live with it to that extent. But that was one of those kind of like middle ground things of like, okay, did we really need this? You know what I mean? But if Braille exists and it's a thing, fine. You know what I mean? That's kind of a cool thing to add for Toph in that situation, if that's what you want to add for her. I could live with that to a certain extent because it allows it avails her to do certain more cool things like that. You know what I mean? Like putting messages in Earth. You know what I mean? Kind of like when she did the big sand bending thing of all of Ba Sing Se on the beach. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. Or precision.
It is kind of weird just in general, though, the way they handle it. Because the whole thing of Toph is that she's born blind. And while, like, yes, a blind person, even born blind, can learn, like, Braille. That's because it's Braille and they can feel the characters.
Yeah. The
idea of her knowing an actual alphabet is weird for someone who's born blind. It's not impossible. It's like they can do raised, detailed characters, but it is way harder to actually accurately perceive detailed characters. That's why Braille is just dots.
Yeah.
Because it is very clear and distinct and easy to interpret dots through raised characters compared to trying to trying to actually feel out and understand a complex 7-stroke kanji.
Yeah, exactly. Like, imagine if somebody just spelled out Airbender in Braille, but with English lettering, and you're reading it just like, okay, L-A-S. You know what I mean? It's going to be way harder, and especially with kanji characters. You know what I mean? It's just like, okay, hold on. Is it this character? Or is this character? You know what I mean? Because somebody's writing could be off or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's significantly harder. It's significantly harder just in general, but then, like, you also had to add the extra context of, once again, born blind, so she's never seen the characters. Someone who's seen the writing, even with their eyes closed, will have a much easier time actually figuring out what they're trying to feel.
Yeah. But
so just the whole thing is just very weird to do. Like, if they wanted to do their world having a Braille or some equivalent to it, then they should have just done Braille or some equivalent to it, not just, okay, she can just, read and write like normal.
Yeah. But either way, that's about all we got for the good, because once again, like I said at the beginning, the locales, the cinematography, the shots, the actual locations that they shot a bunch of the stuff, totally fine. The actors did their jobs reasonably well. They're working with what they're given. You know what I mean? It's not their fault. Unless they were the ones who wrote it, which they weren't.
The other thing that was really good was the sound design.
Sound design.
Very good.
But to be fair, let's be fair about the sound design. Sound design being what it is, yes, I understand sound design is difficult and all that stuff, but from the soundtrack standpoint, soundtrack already existed. They just had to put the freaking right soundtracks and the right songs in the right locations, and they did that. That was one of the few things they did correct, and there were a couple remixes on some of the, like when Iroh is mourning his son at the tree. They had that song, and it was a little bit of a more there was more instruments to it, and I liked it. I like the instruments they added to it. It was initially, I believe, it was a full piano song, and with this version, they added like violin and something else, like a traditional like flute kind of thing to it as well, and it was really nice. But
it wasn't piano; it was I can't remember the name of it, but it's the freaking it's the Chinese instrument that it's played almost like a piano, but it's just a bunch of strings.
Right, yeah, it's kind of like a lyre, kind of, something like that.
The design is actually very similar to like an electronic keyboard.
Yeah. But
with long strings attached to it, and you pluck at the strings.
Yep.
But it sounds very piano-esque.
Right. So, at the end of the day, that stuff was good too. But, and again, I don't want to spend the next hour ragging on this, okay? But, let's just start with the fact for the bad stuff, because that was pretty much all, the majority of the nice stuff that we can say about it, was everything was out of order. Let's from the start here, okay? So, we basically started with the Serpent's Pass. You know what I mean? That was right before Ba Sing Se. If you look at it, when they go through the Serpent's Pass and then the pregnant woman has her child, when Aang like jumps up into the air, they're like 5 to 10 miles from the outer wall of Ba Sing Se. Not, we're going to cross the Serpent's Pass and then still have to walk for another couple weeks. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no. Ba Sing Se is technically landlocked, but it's still very close to the ocean. It's on like the far northeast side of the Earth Kingdom.
Right, which from the side they were coming from, the Serpent's Pass exists because of that lake that's like out there in front of Ba Sing Se. That was the only way to go, was the two lakes, and the pass cuts through the lakes. So it's the only land route to get there without fucking going all the way around half the world, right? Okay, so that's why the Serpent's Pass was a thing, because it was that close to Ba Sing Se. They made it seem like it was way farther away, which it's not. So not only was that incorrect, but just everything with the pacing that they did with how everything panned itself out. Because in season 2, they go back to Omashu, and that's how they introduce Mei's character, because her family has taken over as like the regional governors of like whatever they called it. I think Azula called it New Ozai. You know what I mean? So just everything with that, and just how they bifurcated Bumi's stuff, which again, let's not forget that Bumi had was written horribly in season 1, but in season 2 they pretty much made him how he acts in the situation after he gets captured, except instead of being in that Iron Maiden just completely locked in, he's in a room, you know what I mean, that he could easily get out of, no problem. You know what I mean? Not like a real prison.
I mean, they stuck him in a room of iron.
Yeah.
Which, under normal circumstances, if you think of an earthbender, you'd think, yeah, a room of iron would keep him contained. But this is Bumi, the guy who could literally earthbend half of the city with the wave of his chin.
Yeah. So, that was okay. But again, just the stuff out of context, if you've seen the original series, you know how out of order this was. You know what I mean? We didn't get the swamp. The swamp was one of the first episodes that led Aang to Toph after the whole the generals at the that first Earth Kingdom town wanted to control the Avatar state and stuff like that. Then they go to the swamp and he learns about how everything's connected, and the swamp bender guy teaches him about the tree and how everything's connected, and that's how he finds Appa in the swamp. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So them skipping the swamp was a massive oof, because the swamp is integral to that world.
Yeah, and that's also the thing that's actually the thing that leads him to freaking wanting Toph as his teacher in the first place. It's like they do the whole
they do the whole Bumi thing. Bumi tells him about the Jing stuff, and then that's when they go to the swamp right after that, and then he has that vision. You know what I mean? So the whole thing is in this they skip the swamp and they have the whole thing is be oh, she's a master. He just sees her and decides, oh, she's a master of neutral Jing. When in the original, the whole thing is he has the visions, and then when he actually meets Toph and he sees her using her seismic sense, he realizes, oh, she's doing I saw in the swamp and perceiving the world through all its connections and so on and so forth. Yeah. So, once again, one of the biggest flaws with this season was, once again, the writing as usual, and the fact that so many things were out of order. If you want to have because of how things happened in Omashu and all that stuff, the way they wrote it, it made sense for them to have to, ferry the refugees and stuff like that, and the way they did it, which was okay for what it was. That's what brought Sai and that, the flower woman together and all that stuff as extra characters. That was totally fine for what it was. But at the end of the day, this was a journey for the Avatar and his friends. He didn't have to ferry people from Omashu halfway across the continent to Ba Sing Se. That was never something he did. They were doing all the other stuff that they were doing. Going to the swamp, getting pulled into the swamp, then finding Toph, you know what I mean? And then dealing with Azula and her gang and all the stuff that leads to Zuko alone. And then slowly over the course of the season, after the stuff that happens in the desert with the Sandbenders and Appa getting abducted and stolen, then leading to Ba Sing Se. You know what I mean?
Ultimately, in the original story, they don't have any reason to go to Ba Sing Se.
Yeah.
There's no actual intention to go to Ba Sing Se. It's only once Appa gets kidnapped and brought to Ba Sing Se that they detour to go to Ba Sing Se. In this one, for whatever reason, they just decide to make Ba Sing Se the goal in the first place.
Right. So
and don't have Appa get kidnapped until they're in Ba Sing Se.
Right. Which, moving forward with that stuff, all the stuff that was out of order aside, let's talk about something that was just another major problem with this that season 1 didn't really have. Maybe a couple times it had a couple of it, but most of the time they were spot on. Bending is a martial art that requires precise and exact movements to a certain extent. Like, Boomy can do stuff, like true masters can do crazy stuff with like small motions, like what Boomy can do with his chin and stuff like that you see later on. But at the end of the day, you can't just do this and chain lightning across a table.
Yeah,
that's like the biggest thing. A lot of the bending forms didn't exist in this, and Azula was just throwing lightning out willy-nilly. Every time that Azula fires lightning in the series, she does the same motion. Ozai does the same motion. When Iroh is teaching Zuko about the redirection technique, it's the reverse motion of creating lightning. That's why it's the lightning reversal. You know what I mean? So not having that martial art connection to a lot of the sequences was really, really bad, because bending is that kind of martial art, and not having the motions and all that kind of stuff, that was bad. It just looked awkward.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? They're not superpowers. Bending is a martial art that takes precision and, precise movement. And not having that is bad.
Yeah, basic bendings can be done without motion, but you lose a lot of control and power in doing so. Like,
right.
It's never actually like mentioned directly in the main series. It's part of one of the books that goes into like some Toph and Boomy stuff after the fact.
Yeah.
But Boomy like specifically mentions that like his thing where like once again when he freaking does earthbending with just moving his chin, he has next to no control over it. That's why he wiggles his chin and freaking demolishes a building.
Right. He's like, well, didn't mean to do that, but it just kind of happened because it's imprecise.
Yeah, he has the power and the ability to do it, and the power to like do drastic things with it, but he doesn't really have precise control over it. That's why he just, like I said, he wiggles his chin, demolishes a building while knocking himself out of his freaking Iron Maiden.
Yeah. So that was one of the things. And to that end, at the same time, the other thing that they got wrong with bending was you can't fight somebody with bending. Once somebody has control of a rock, you can't take control of it unless they've, like, if, say, Toph fires a rock toward Aang, yes, if she's still not controlling it, he can, like, push it to the side or break through it or whatever. Same thing with, like, when Katara, like, passes Aang water in, like, they can move together and work together as a team. You can't just see Katara waving, like, like the water whip around her head and just say, no, F you, and take it from her. She's controlling it. It's over. You know what I mean? Like when they had Aang fighting Toph from slamming him out of his bed, once that earthbending has started, there's no stopping it. That's not how bending works. It's like firing a bullet. You know what I mean? It's over.
Yeah. Yeah, no. Well, once someone else has established control over an object, you cannot control it unless they rescind control over it or lose their concentration and stop controlling it.
Right.
So
you can't.
Like
you're not going to have a Dragon Ball power struggle. You know what I mean?
Yeah, in your example of the whole thing of, like when Aang and Katara work together, it's because Katara sends the water to him, then releases control and allows him to take it over.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you have multiple examples over the course of this season of things like Aang trying to fight Toph's control of the bed, or there are a couple scenes where they earthbenders throw things and they seize control of them midair to redirect them, when like it's possible, but not until the person releases control over it, which usually doesn't happen until it's well out of their range. Meanwhile, a lot of the scenes in this, they were just grabbing them immediately, basically, and throwing them.
Yeah.
And one of the other, the bed thing is like the most egregious, but like the other really egregious one was freaking Azula taking Zuko's fire.
Yeah.
And just friggin' usurping it and then sending it back at him.
Yeah. So, I don't know. That was just another one of those things that we looked at and like, what are you guys on about? You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, what are you going to do about it? At this point, I'm interested in season 3 purely from I've made a game out of it, because at one point when we were watching it, you guys when they added that like Fire Nation like refugee camp, like the people that defected from Iroh's attack and they got like their own district in Ba Sing Se. I was sitting there.
Said you mean Zhang Zhang?
Yeah, who we assume is Zhang Zhang at this point, based on what happened with the White Lotus stuff, which we'll get to in a minute. Because of all the crazy madness that they changed, I was like, Liu Ten's gonna be in the freaking district, isn't he? that was the thing. I was like, okay, let's make a game out of it now. For the real fans and the people that know they're butchering it. If you have any interest in it, just make a game out of it. Just think, what could they possibly do here? Like, what madness could they do to change something? And I was like, Liu Ten's gonna be in there, but it didn't happen, obviously. But I was like, that felt like something that they could potentially do, because let's not forget, a little aside here, Pipsqueak and the Duke are freaking dead.
Yeah.
What? You know what I mean? Not only are they dead, but for some reason, their gear is in Wan Shi Tong's library? What the actual hell?
Which makes even less sense, because they made Washing Tong's library already in the spirit world in this one, not in the physical world.
Right. So there's your segue. Once again, when they find the library, it's still in the real world. You know, it's just buried by sand, what have you, and, you know, before he reclaims it and takes it back to the spirit world after, the events of the actual anime. But here, the whole thing was, and again, let's start by saying this. The Avatar cannot forcibly pull people into the spirit world. Only they can. They're the bridge between spirits because, as we learn in Korra, the light spirit is part of them, so that they can just kind of bounce between the spirit world and be that medium whenever they want. They, being part spirit, cannot pull people in. Only full spirits can do it, like when Heibai is angry and pulls the people in because he was blaming them for the forest burning down. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the only way for normal people to enter the spirit world is if a true spirit pulls them in, or if there is some form of portal/gateway to the spirit world, like it's established in the Southern Water Tribe during Korra.
Yeah. So you could argue this scar in the middle of Ba Sing Se could be something to that effect, and if they had used that as the reason, like Aang just like, okay, I'm going to the spirit world, and then I'm going to open the door for you guys. That makes more sense than him just, hey, I'm going to meditate here and then forcibly pull your spirit bodies out. That's not how that works.
Even spirit bending can't do that.
Yeah. So that was another problem with that. The library being where it was, I can forgive that to a certain extent. You know what I mean? That was what it was.
Having the idea of the library be in Ba Sing Se, that's fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
It butchers the whole freaking Toph scene.
Yeah, it butchers the whole Toph scene. It butchers Appa being caught or whatever. But for what they're doing, fine, whatever. You can forgive that for what it is. But everything that even happened in the library, like the Pipsqueak stuff, like Kyoshi just showing up and talking to Toph, the avatars are connected to the light spirit. They're not just floating around in the spirit world. Yeah. You know what I mean? Aang sees Roku in the spirit world because he's there, and it's a reflection of his spirit, and he's just talking to Roku, you know, down in the water as like a reflection of himself. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No,
Roku doesn't have his own house like they gave like Gyatso, or like in Korra where, you know, where Iroh's living in his own place in the spirit world. You know what I mean? The avatars aren't just scattered throughout the spirit world in their own little domains. They're connected to the light spirit.
Yeah, no, particularly spiritual individuals can exist within the spirit world after their death, like Iroh. Presumably Gyatso could as well, though that's something that they change in this to have him show up in season 1.
Yeah.
We never actually see him in the spirit world.
Yeah.
But the Avatar specifically can't because the whole thing is that their souls are tied to the light spirit, and therefore they can't manifest anywhere else. They are just part of the light spirit. Therefore, they are perpetually being reincarnated with the avatar and can't go anywhere else.
Yeah. So that was another just maddening thing with that whole situation. Is it kind of cool from like a meta perspective to have Kyoshi talk to Toph? Absolutely. It was something. You know, they had that whole Beifong connection, whatever, what have you, if you want to do that the Beifongs were a problem even in Kyoshi's time, sure, whatever. No big deal. You want to add to Kyoshi's story, fine. No big deal, right? But at the end of the day...
I know Kyoshi had her own book. I don't know if it ever actually goes into like the Beifongs being around in her time and then.
Right.
I always was under the interpretation based off of the show itself that the Beifongs were relatively new nobles.
Yeah, that's what it felt like.
But like I said, I haven't actually read the Kyoshi book, so I don't know if it goes into anything there, like establishing the Beifongs as being older.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, that was some of the weirder stuff there. But I don't know. The other major problem with the library is they completely just, not only are they one of Toph's greatest feats of strength, and what pushes her to learn sand bending more is when Appa gets stolen because she can't do anything about it, but she holds up the entirety of the library from its top when it's in the physical world. What she was doing here was irrelevant. There was nothing to hold up. Their gateway was already in the spirit world. There was nothing to hold up. There was just a scar, and she was holding up a random building in that district that just happened to be there. She wasn't holding up the spiritual door because she'd already returned to her physical body. There was nothing there for her to hold up. You know what I mean? The gateway wasn't going anywhere. They could have just walked out the gate at any point and popped back to the scar. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if they had actually established it as, you know, a proper spirit gateway, rather than doing the whole Aang thing, there would be some semblance of that. But also, once again, if they alter her holding up the entire library in sand, so poor footing, to her struggling to hold up a half, like, barely existent single wall.
Yeah, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of metric tons underneath sand that she was holding up to a couple 100-pound wall. Those are two very different feats of strength.
Yeah. And then add to that, once again, they basically tried to recreate the scene just in Ba Sing Se. This is when Appa gets captured. In the original show, it makes sense. It's sand, and the sandbenders, she can't do anything really because she's holding up the library and she can't bend sand at that point, and she has a hard time even perceiving things through sand. But she still manages to identify it's the sandbenders. Meanwhile, in this scene, she's in the middle of Ba Sing Se on solid ground, holding up a flimsy wall.
5 feet from where Appa's being kidnapped.
5 feet from where Appa's being kidnapped. And not only can she not help Appa, she can't identify who was capturing him.
Yeah, which she would have been able to because of how close she was to just in general and her vibration sense. So tell me that you didn't watch the show while trying to tell me you watched the show. You know what I mean? Just the complete lack of understanding of the fundamentals of any character. Not just Toph. Okay? Well, like Age mentioned, Sokka's actor is doing well enough, but they still eviscerated his entire character arc because, once again, one of the biggest overarching problems in the Avatar universe, even going into Korra later on, is misogyny and the patriarchy being women aren't in power. At all. Okay? Meanwhile, General Sung is just, hi, one of the arguably the most important general in Ba Sing Se. Listen, you guys, I understand women's empowerment and wanting to have strong female characters. I love strong female characters. They're great. But if you're doing a shot-for-shot remake or whatever they're doing here, you can't fundamentally remove the oppression that is in a major part of the world. You know what I mean? Especially with the Earth Kingdom. What women do, for the most part in the Earth Kingdom, are 2D. That's as far as they get. You know what I mean? They're certainly not going to be anywhere near a generalship, because even 70-something years later, after Zuko and Aang and the gang make their new world, even Toph's daughter has a problem with the people still have a problem with her having all the authority that she does. You know what I mean? And even then, it's not as much of authority as she should have. You know what I mean? And during Aang's childhood, like during the part of the series, women don't have a lot of power anywhere. Like Azula is arguably the most powerful woman in the world when it comes to politics at the time.
And that's one of the big struggles with her character over the whole thing is Zuko's older and male and gets clear preferential treatment from Ozai. He's always trying to push for Zuko to be the heir.
Yeah.
And so she's, despite her being the clearly superior one of the two in her eyes. So she's always trying to fight to discredit Zuko and hold herself up higher to get more of Ozai's attention and make herself become the heir. Because, once again, she's got both things against her of Zuko being the male child and the first child.
Right. But to that end, another thing that was...
Was it Azula the first? I can't remember if Azula was the firstborn.
I think they're very close together. You know what I mean? If they weren't born at the same time, it was like within a year. That it was. You know what I mean? They're always portrayed as like being very close, like not twins, obviously, but potentially like within a year, whatever.
Yeah, I think she's a year older, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. But either way, Zuko is still considered to be like the heir candidate for most of their childhood.
Yeah.
Because he's the male.
Right.
And it isn't until he gets disgraced that she starts really being considered as the next possible Fire Lord. And that's when she really starts getting starts on the path of her like going deranged, is her trying to basically keep Zuko in line beneath her.
Yeah.
Because she knows if he ever manages to reclaim his honor, then he's most likely going to regain the heirship.
Yeah. So, yeah, and to that end, the evisceration of Azula's character. They have, while they did that stuff with her having, like, Ty Lee and May fight to the death, quote-unquote, gonna get to something about that in a minute. Azula does not have the commanding, terrifying presence that she carries herself with in the actual animated series. She always had that aura of just... everybody was afraid of her. She had the lore and like myth behind her that, oh, that's the Fire Nation princess. That's Azula. She's ridiculous. We don't want anything to do with her. She's completely cold-blooded, calculating. She's a terrifying opponent. You know what I mean? That one member of the Dai Li, when he's like talking to Long Feng in jail in the animated series, is just like, he explains her perfectly. You know what I mean? She doesn't carry herself this way in this. She's not written this way in this. What they tried to do with her in this is how they kind of changed their mother's backstory when they're like, they had Zuko and Azula's mother like put them together and say, you need to always take care of each other. That wasn't something that the mother did. She was always like, what's wrong with Azula? Like, she tried with Azula all the time, but she already resigned to the fact that there was something wrong with Azula fundamentally, and, tried with her, but just kind of like, well, Azula is just kind of whatever. And she always put more of her love and just effort into Zuko, and only protected Zuko. You know what I mean? After all the stuff that happened with Iroh and the Azulan stuff and everything that happens. But in this, she tells them to stick together, and for whatever reason with the writing, this version of Azula has like weirdly, well, yes, in the animated series she was affected by how her mother treated her and kind of like brushed her aside and stuff like that. In this, they have Azula taking it to heart, saying like, no, Zuko, we need to work together. Azula's never needed anybody outside of May and Ty Lee, who she just saw as competent lackeys that wouldn't defy her.
Yeah, she never even needed May and Ty Lee. May and Ty Lee were just convenient because she knew she could she knew that they were competent, and she knew that she could keep control over them easily.
Right. And they had the whole
May
childhood
because-
friend connection, what have you, but still, that's, you know.
Yeah, May, because May was always very subservient towards her from their childhood, and Ty Lee because she knew she could manipulate Ty Lee, and that's why she just immediately jumps to coercion with her to get her to recruit her.
Right. So I don't know what they're doing with this power of family thing that they're doing with Azula. She's lost. The easiest way to put this, she's lost her edge. She's a dull blade now. It's boring.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? She doesn't have it. And that's
She
going to be
doesn't. So it's kind of funny because they have her openly and friggin' no hesitation kill people multiple times in this season, but at the same time they've actually made her less psychotic.
Yeah, it's so weird. Like, you guys know when she just RKO's one of the Judies in the middle of the freaking marketplace? That's something Azula would never do. She was, when it came to like espionage and subterfuge and how she handled that situation before, she would have never done that. I don't think she would have even done the whole, let's chain lightning the entire generalship of Ba Sing Se. I don't think she would have done that either. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no,
she wants to control people. She's not going to just off everybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. Azula actually rarely ever kills anyone in the original series because they can't do anything for you if they're dead. She'd rather find some way to blackmail, coerce, intimidate you into doing what she wants than just kill you. The only time she ever resorts to actually killing is when it's a thing of, like, in the case of Zuko, she genuinely tries to kill Zuko because he's a genuine threat to her power, and there isn't really anything she can do to actually get anything out of him.
Right.
The only time she ever feels like she can get anything out of him is the end of the season here, where where before in the original series she manipulates him into coming back with her.
Yeah.
Because she feels like she can get an edge with their father by bringing him back.
Yeah. But yeah, so her character evisceration leads to a problem in the next season, which it's going to happen, is one of the biggest turning points for any character is when May realizes that she loves Zuko more than she fears Azula. And then once again, because Ty Lee is Ty Lee, let's not forget that the second she has to choose between May and Azula, she knocks out Azula without a second thought. You know what I mean? So it'll be interesting to see what they do with that based on what they did with May and Ty Lee here, with them admitting that they would kill each other. They would never kill each other. Ever. They would choose each other over Azula every time. You know what I mean? So, especially after the events in season 3. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, like May is scared of Azula, but she gets over that. And Ty Lee has never been loyal to Azula.
Yeah.
Once again, the only reason Ty Lee's working with Azula is because of coercion and blackmail.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see the ramifications of that in season 3 and what is changed about that. You know what I mean? But in slightly more of like a middle ground, like not necessarily bad, a little bit of like extra good stuff here at the end. I think they did an okay job with Zuko just in his average everyday life in Ba Sing Se. You know what I mean? I think that was okay. All the stuff that he was doing, they did the sequence with like that random girl that like asked him out at the tea house and all that kind of stuff. They kind of like made her character slightly different and whatnot. All the Zuko stuff in Ba Sing Se was fine, but to that end, another 2 things that we have to talk about here before the end that they did add and change. I like the fact that they made the Blue Spirit kind of like a Fire Nation folklore, kind of like a Robin Hood-esque hero. That was a cool addition to the Blue Spirit, more than just Zuko donning the mask and him becoming the legend of the Blue Spirit and starting it himself. Zuko seeing the Blue Spirit as a kid in the play and like it being like a superhero to him. I think that was good. That was a good change to the Blue Spirit. You know what I mean? I like what they did with the Blue Spirit stuff and whatnot. Conversely, what they did with the Painted Lady this season was ridiculous. Anyway, little technical difficulties there aside. What I was about to say was one of the major things with just Eastern and just, culture in Japan, mythos in Japan, China, all those kind of places, is when it comes to like spiritual beings and spirits and like gods and stuff like that, most of them are in like a locale, Beijing or Tokyo or this region. You know what I mean? The Painted Lady is a river spirit of the Fire Nation.
Yeah.
Okay? That specific river from, in season 3 where Katara does the Painted Lady stuff. In this, they made the Painted Lady like it's one thing if you make the spirit like it could be worldwidely known because of what she does, but that's not going to extend her influence. You know what I mean? So you could have heard of like the Painted Lady and what she symbolizes and stuff like that, but people in the Earth Nation aren't going to have murals to the Painted Lady. They're so far that they're almost as far from the Painted Lady as you can get. You know what I mean? So it was just kind of weird because those spirits are locked to their region generally, and they're not worldwide. So that was another thing that was kind of weird. Is like, now what did they? So they're going to remove the Painted Lady stuff possibly from season 3 because that was a kind of a big development for Katara and how she wanted to like further, prove that she wanted to help people and stuff like that. And all this was randomly furthering the fact that Katara now knows hand-to-hand combat. She's not a melee fighter. She's a bender. You know what I mean? That was another weird thing that they did with her was like Suki inviting her to the Kyoshi warriors, who are predominantly all non-benders and fight without bending. That's their deal. And, Katara never learns standard martial arts. She's a master waterbender. She's not going to fight hand-to-hand. You know what I mean? And a waterbender in Ba Sing Se, while not, well, you could call it a rare sight, isn't unheard of. You could have a waterbender out there doing stuff and helping people with waterbending. You know what I mean? It's bad in the Fire Nation, obviously. Any other bender in the Fire Nation is a problem, like when she was trying to hide the fact that she was a waterbender there. But there's no reason for her to hide the fact that she's a waterbender and disguise herself as the Painted Lady in Ba Sing Se.
I mean, they even question it in this season of like, well, why would you bother hiding yourself?
Yeah, it's just, it didn't make any sense. The Blue Spirit stuff, totally fine. Like I said, I like what they did with the Blue Spirit. I thought that was pretty cool. That was a neat addition to that lore, and making the Blue Spirit like a hero for Zuko that he could like draw and like, I'm gonna put the mask on and be the Blue Spirit. I'm gonna be like the Robin Hood, the guy that helps people, what have you, that kind of thing. That was fine. That was a fine addition.
The weirdest thing with the Blue Spirit change is just the fact that it is even a Fire Nation legend in the first place.
Right.
Fire Nation is very counter to normal Fire Nation ideals, being a very materialistic warrior culture.
Yeah. So those were two of the last like major things that were just kind of weird. You know what I mean? Some of the stuff with Iroh was kind of out there, but once again, we're pushing over an hour here at this point. I don't want to rag on it forever. And we could keep going, but I really don't want to. We hit all the major points, stuff like that. The writing, it was what it was. If you know the original series, you know what was wrong with it. And they had the audacity to put some of the, big, impactful lines into these situations verbatim when they're not doing a shot-for-shot remake, which I find ridiculous. You know what I mean? And the last thing to mention here, too, is double-sided coin. Let's end on a twofer. A good side of a coin and the bad side of a coin. I like what they did with Toph's mom. Her being the one to capture Toph after the blunder that was making it the boulder. Are you kidding me? You're doing that to my dude, the boulder. You know what I mean?
To be fair, the boulder was entertaining.
Yeah, the boulder was entertaining. But still, turning him into what, the tracker and stuff like that, they did the boulder dirty. That was fucking rude. I'm just gonna say it. But the fact that Toph's mom becoming the one that captures her and stuff like that, reasonably okay. I can live with it. But the major problem here was by them not having the guru be part of this and him not having his whole monologue with all the stuff that was going on during all that sequence, you know what I mean? Sokka never goes back and links up with his dad like he does in this point, you know what I mean? Aang's not with the guru. Toph isn't slowly figuring out how to metal bend. She just, I'm a metal bender. That completely kills the impact of that moment. That was horrendous.
Yeah, they have her do the line, I'm Toph Beifong, I invented metal bending.
Yeah.
But, like, in the actual show, that's an actually major payoff because she's in there for like 6 hours trying to figure out a way to get out while talking with her freaking teacher and the Coliseum guy.
Yeah.
In this, it's just, oh, she wakes up, her mom sasses her a bit, and then she just punches a hole through the freaking thing.
Yeah, that entire moment was eviscerated because that was one of the cooler moments in the entire series, and they just absolutely annihilated it. You know, so I don't know. That was what it was, but yeah, that was another thing that we just had to head scratch at. And so there's the two sides of the coin there, something reasonable and then something terrible. Final thing to mention here. Not only was the actor for Zuko massively ripped when he took his shirt off. I was like, God damn, this dude, he better sign up for WWE. He could freaking body slam whoever he wants with those arms. But that whole sequence being changed the way it was in the catacombs there, not only was it bad, and I don't really want to go into just the super specifics of all that because, you know, Azula isn't manhandled by Aang or Katara in that fight. She makes them look stupid. But...
Well, yeah, I explained while we were watching the episode. The whole thing to that was just the fact that since they skipped the guards trying to force the Avatar state, this version of the show hasn't actually shown proper Avatar state and how strong it is yet. So they had to make a spectacle of him going Avatar state for the first time in this scene, where it doesn't really make any sense because they didn't do it the previous time.
Right. Now, to that end, not only was when Azula shoots lightning at Aang in the original series a complete ambush, because when Aang decides to let go of Katara to enter the Avatar state, he's, you know, he covers himself with rocks or whatever he does, and then he does it, and when he comes out, Azula is just like, well, I caught you monologuing, bonk, it's over. She shoots him in the back. Right in the center of his back. In this, she hits him right here in the solar plexus. Okay? Fine. No big deal. Okay? Whatever. They changed the location that Aang gets hit by lightning, with incorrect form, of course, but what have you. Here's where the problem lies. When they all escape on Appa, they recreate the scene on Appa pretty much shot for shot, and Azula puts the freaking water from the northern holy water, or whatever you want to call it, into the wound on his back, which wouldn't exist because he got hit in the chest. Lightning is not a through and through. It just hits you and impacts and disperses across your body. There isn't going to be a freaking wound on his back mirroring the one on his chest.
Yeah, the only way that there would be any sort of wound anywhere else on his body besides where the lightning impacted him is as if there was some other conductor on another part of his body.
Yeah.
Like if he had a metal rod behind him.
Right. So that was another thing that I was just like, hold on, this is where you do the shot for shot, except for Sai's flying Appa instead. And then you have Katara do the thing where she pulls him over and it's all dramatic and it's like, oh man, I don't know if the water is going to work, but it's just like, are you rubbing aloe vera on his feet to solve his neck wound? Full red versus blue style? The wound is here, right here in his chest. Not in his back, based on your own writing. What are you doing? So that's what we ended the season on. Just like you look at it and go, hey, Katara, what are you doing? Aang got shot in the chest. So, yeah. And then a quick side note. Katara tried to have Aang learn healing. That's not something you learn. You're either born as a waterbender that can heal or not. That's not something you just learn. That was another like random aside that was just completely wrong. kind of glossed over, but I'll mention it now that we've mentioned healing without going super into it. But simple fact of the matter, you either have the healing ability as a waterbender or you don't. It's not something you just learn. You learn how to do it better, but you either have it or you don't.
Yeah, water healing is hereditary and predominantly passed to females.
Yeah.
Like, there are male healers, but they're very rare.
Right. So, yeah. I can't wait for season 3 just so that I can I won't say hate watch it. I'm going to play that game of like I did with I was like, oh man, is Liu 10 going to be in the Fire Nation district and he just defected and he's been lying about his death the whole time? Because that's what it looked like they were going to do. And I was honestly disappointed that it didn't happen.
Oh, yeah, that was the other thing I was going to mention, was that you were talking about the whole the Liu 10 coming back. It's like, yeah, no, instead of the whole thing was they moved Liu 10, the whole scene of Iroh doing the memorial at the tree to the lower ring, which doesn't make any sense. It's supposed to be at the inner ring because, once again, the whole moral of the story is he was never able to reach the inner ring through combat, and it cost him his son. But then he reaches the inner ring through peace, so he makes peace with his son. But so they move it to the outer ring, and now Zhang is apparently the one who got Liu 10 killed.
Right. So, in another little aside thing, without going super into it, is super aggravating. Iroh was a Grand Lotus in the original series. They're painting him as a damn initiate in this one, which is insane.
Yeah, they do that whole scene of him getting initiated by Zhang when he's supposed to be a Grand Lotus alongside Bumi, friggin' Sokka's Swordmaster, and there's 6 Grand Lotus in total.
The water tribe guy from the north, the misogynist guy, Paku.
Yeah.
It's because when they show up in season 3 after June finds where Iroh is, it's Bumi, Zhang, Pian Dao, the swordsman guy, and Paku that all show up for them.
Yeah, and then Iroh, so it's 5.
Yeah. So yeah, that's another thing that's just going to be what? So, again, when season 3 comes out, we'll probably do something about it. I don't think we might do a reaction series just to have something that's negative. You know what I mean? Because they ain't fixing this. There's no fixing this. So it'd be worse. It'd be worse at this point if they then now for season 3 did a shot for shot remake of the original and just forego everything they did the first 2 seasons. And then it's just so you're not even going to respect your own nonsense. That's even worse. So I look forward to hate watching this one and playing my own personal game of what could they possibly do here? So,
yeah. We definitely have enough to say about this to do a proper reaction and discussion. Because
trust me, you guys, we could keep going for at least another 2 hours, guaranteed. If we wanted to break down each thing episode by episode, don't want to do that to you guys. I think a little over an hour is good enough here, but you guys get it. If you are a fan of the original series, I saw a lot of people hyping this up, and maybe they're hyping up because they want to see how bad it's going to be. You know what I mean? Because it was bad across the board. Were there good points? Absolutely. The stuff we talked about, but that doesn't, take away from the fact that all they had to do was color in the lines. They colored in the lines for the locales. They color in the lines for the majority of the actors. You know what I mean? Yeah, with some miscasts or whatever. They colored in the lines for the sound design and the soundtrack and stuff like that. But it's just the writing and the direction that just kill it. You know what I mean? They take away, they eviscerate certain character traits. They eviscerate certain traits of the world itself to push real world agendas. Look at what happened with Supergirl. You know what I mean? This is a fantasy world and a fantasy setting with these established problems, and you can't just insert a female general or a female leader. That just doesn't make sense. You know what I mean?
If they were going to freaking gender swap General Sung, at least give some background or reason for it, because they they turned General Sung from a like 60-something old general guy to a like late 30s, maybe early 40s female general that
Right.
like doesn't even have a similar character to him, really.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. Once again, there's nothing wrong with strong female characters, but when you have it established in the world that there's still massive oppression and women aren't in power, just doing it because you're on a soapbox in a freaking Netflix studio, it just doesn't make sense. You know, it's kind of like the period pieces where I've mentioned this plenty of times before, where there was that period piece in like 1500s Norway that some crew did in it was like a Norwegian crew that did this, and they had their Hollywood debut of this period piece movie, historically accurate in 1600 Scandinavia, and people out here in LA were like, why aren't there any minorities? I don't think there were a lot of Hispanics or black people or whatever, people of different races in 1600 Scandinavia. They were all white people. They were all Scandinavians. So I don't know what you expect. Learn your history, people. The world has not always been the same that it is right now. That's the easiest way to put it. Things have changed drastically, even in the last couple hundred years. And 400 years ago, no. You know what I mean? So you're doing a period piece, and that's how they responded. It's just like, we did a period piece on 1600s Norway. I don't know where you think there are a lot of what you call minorities out here, but there weren't. You know what I mean? So it's the same thing with this. In the simple fact of the matter is, in the Last Airbender universe, there's a lot of misogyny, patriarchy, and oppression of women. That's just a fact. Is it right? No, but it's part of the story and it's realistic. So
yeah, like the only one of the nations that had more or less full gender equality was the air nomads.
Right. And they had detached themselves from the world in general, so there was no need for oppression and inequality. Because they were air nomads, they were monks, so
yeah.
But anyway, we just want to talk about this for a bit, and it ended up being a little over an hour, but once again, you guys, we could have kept going, but I don't want to keep inserting more negativity into our stuff. This was as negative as I possibly want to get. You know what I mean? And this was a prime example of what we had to do to prove that, when something's good, we'll say so. When something's bad, we're also going to say so. There were absolutely good bits of this, but that doesn't take away from the fact that, predominantly speaking, when you're doing a live action remake of something or a live action version of something, like the One Piece, in short, the One Piece live action was great. And that's without me having seen the source material that they've covered so far in either fashion. I haven't read the manga. I haven't watched that part of the anime. I don't know. But I know something is good when I see it, and it looks like what Oda would have written, having seen other parts of One Piece that I've seen. You know what I mean? In this case, having seen all The Last Airbender when I was younger, when I was a kid, and seeing this and knowing it, and I've watched it multiple times as an adult, and just looking at it going, they have it right here. All they had to do is take the coloring book and color in the lines. They chose to color in the other stadium for certain things while keeping some of the high profile, big time quotes. You know what I mean? That's it. So it is what it is. And that's as nice as I can be about it without getting super butt mad and pissed off and, throw a keyboard at something, you know what I mean? Because it is aggravating. You know what I mean? It is massively disrespectful to the original, and just disrespectful as somebody, like if you're a cover artist and you cover say Amelie, she covers all kinds of anime stuff. She doesn't do a disservice by completely redoing a song. You know what I mean? Like a cover artist will cover the song and try to make it as true to the original as they can, but still in their voice, obviously. But in this case, they just took something that was beloved and very well written and one of the better animated shows of its generation, and just have made it something that is just terrible. You know what I mean? Very, very mediocre at best, when it comes to the writing and direction. The rest of it, Stop blaming the actors. It's not their fault. You know what I mean? You guys are directing your hate at the wrong people. You need to be mad about the people behind the scenes, predominantly Nickelodeon, for allowing this to be a thing. So,
for making this be a thing.
Yeah. Netflix is just taking a money-making opportunity and doing it. And the people in charge are just, for whatever reason, pick your reason, not staying true to the original, whether they are siding with Nickelodeon or what have you. It's still a disgrace across the board. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So, ladies and gentlemen, people of YouTube, beyond how you're watching, as always, we appreciate you stopping by and hanging out with us here in the dojo. And this was us talking about the season 2 of Avatar: The Last Airbender, the live action. And if season 3, when season 3 happens, because we know it's happening, it had to have been greenlit for all 3 seasons. We'll do a reaction series and really have something more in depth for you guys when that comes out. And I assume that it won't be as long of a wait between seasons. At this point, we'll probably get it by 2029, something like that. You know what I mean? Maybe 2028, something like that. Especially since they're obviously doing the shameless cash grab and they just want to get it out and done with and say that they've done it. You know what I mean? But, you know, at the end here, I will absolutely say, if you enjoyed this, more power to you. You can absolutely enjoy things that are bad, but that doesn't stop them from being objectively bad across the board. So, if you enjoyed it, more power to you. But if you haven't watched the original, I suggest you watch the original because it is infinitely better than this. So, we'll be back when season 3 shows up. We'll do a reaction series just so that we can, you know, really go really deep dive into it like we usually do and talk about more stuff and have it be more structured than just the notes that I took here and stuff like that. But anyway, that is what it is. I'm going to go walk off this negativity for a minute. So everybody, have a good morning, evening, afternoon, whatever it is for you. Have a good one. We'll see you next time.
Hey everyone, Victoria here. If you enjoyed the video, please consider pushing those like and subscribe buttons. Your support is greatly appreciated. Thanks again for your time, and we hope to see you again in the future.